May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Do you think I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. You know, originally I had taken off this Sunday, and we aren't leaving for vacation until this afternoon. And I, before looking at the reading, said, hey, Henry, I'm around. I'd be happy to preach Sunday before I leave. Then I read the readings. So welcome to my 5th draft of this sermon. And if you don't like this one, I'm happy to send you an earlier copy, and you can tell me which is better. I don't know about you, but this gospel is a bit hard for me to take. I like my Jesus all kumbaya and pacifist. I also prefer my Jesus to be about my self-fulfillment and to be all about prayer answering, kind of like a divine Santa Claus. Trouble starting just doesn't feel like the Jesus I have come to expect. The Jesus who brings division just doesn't feel like good news. At least not at first glance. So, down at the bottom of the stairs, I know we haven't been doing a lot in the undercroft, but if you have, and occasionally the door gets left open, you'll notice there is a formation closet downstairs, right at the bottom of the stairs. It's a terrible location for it because I am not organized ever. And it is a hot disaster. People drop stuff there that they think I will need some magical day. When we're done with events like VBS, the teens just sort of haul boxes down and I think just literally drop them from 6 feet high and things go everywhere. It's full of supplies for programs that haven't existed in decades and even some curricula that was popular when I myself was a child. The only way to really clean it is to empty it out completely and basically start over. And the process will mean a lot of time where we turn that closet inside out, making a much larger mess over Tammy's hallway downstairs, tossing, recycling, free cycling, organizing, and just redoing it. It's a great image to remember about messes in general, because the truth about all messes, whether they physically fit in closets or the messes we entangle ourselves in as human beings, is that to clean them up, we have to be willing to make a bigger mess first. To blow up the mess, to examine it, to diagnose it, and then to rectify it to be better, to be different, to be healed from before. Our epistle from Hebrews mentions that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam blew up a mess in Egypt and had the faith that God would guide the rebuilding of the pieces. So here in our gospel, we have Jesus standing with his followers who are scratching their heads about his last parable about being ready. And he's standing looking at a world in a mess. But see, it's a mess that masquerades too frequently as order, as normal, as the status quo and the things we expect. And he's pointing out to them that such messes must be made worse on their way to becoming better. Our gospel this morning actually skips a chunk of Luke. So last week, Jesus warned the disciples about being ready. And he uses an end statement of if the owner of the house knew when someone was going to break into their house, they would be ready and prevent it. But then there's this chunk that we skip over in this season about when we know what God is asking of us, but we are just uninterested or unwilling to do it. And this is a piece that maybe sounds familiar. One of the more famous quotes from it is, "From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required, and from one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded." It is from this moment that Jesus comes into this conversation about not coming to bring peace, but division. The implication of the entirety of this section is that the people of God know better and choose not to do it. The people of God have chosen a path of least resistance, of familiarity, or of quiet acquiescence. And we have chosen to let a lot of God's justice slide in the hopes of a quiet but uneasy peace. And haven't we? Isn't that true still? It is easier to go along than it is to question. Things that we have taken for granted, things that we assume, things we have baptized as just and fair, or the way I had to do it, so suck it up, friend, you have to do it that way too. That when we probe it, we just can't really find God's justice in it. I've been really pondering that reality as I've been reading article after article about this huge teacher shortage. Or better put, or more honestly put, the huge teacher devaluing of society, that we have underpaid, overworked, and micromanaged a population for so long that they've decided to quit and do something better with their time and lives. But now, on top of that, public school teachers are actually posting wish lists on social media. You actually can join a Facebook group just for Montgomery County where teachers are posting their wish lists with pleas, like, what would it be? Like a request that says, like, here's why I'm worth you giving me stuff for my first grade classroom. Now, some people, including myself, like we jump on, right? We buy the Connect 4 the teacher wants for the rainy day or the math manipulatives that they need. And we maybe don't stop to question, how did we get here? When did we decide that students and teachers having a fully stocked classroom for supplies and appropriate learning was a point of extra or donation or privilege that teachers have to have, like, kind of halvesy beg on social media to get and not have to pay out of pocket? Rather than guaranteeing that every student and every teacher would have access to the tools necessary to teach and to learn. One would think respecting the dignity of every human being would mean that every child has access to those supplies without any required solicitation or sob story. Then, too, this week, I had a conversation comparing notes with another priest who's a current foster parent. And he reached out because he's only ever had foster children, and so he's only had the experience of children on Medicaid. Because when you get a foster child, they're on Medicaid. And as a biological parent and a foster parent, I have had experience, therefore, to compare what it's like to have children on private insurance and what it's like to have children on Medicaid. And therefore, I know and can confirm his experience by the virtue of just bringing in Medicaid insurance that I was treated differently in the doctor's office. It was noted in my daughter's medical chart that she was on Medicaid. And every conversation I had with doctors and nurses in her pediatric office was colored by that note. It was assumed every appointment that I was incompetent and unprepared. Once I was chastised for the very normal thing of running out of small diapers in my diaper bag because it had been a particularly poopy morning, where the nurse let me know that she was making a note in my chart that I was not prepared to have the things necessary to take care of my daughter. Another time where I'm used to pediatricians with my private insurance discouraging sick appointments for colds and flu because those are viruses that run their course, and all that you do when you bring your kids in for them is you infect the office. Until you get an ear infection or something, and then you have to get treated. And so when I brought in my daughter on her Medicaid insurance, I was questioned about how long I neglected my baby's cold and cough before I sought medical intervention. Would I just leave her with a cold? But we don't want to make waves. We don't want to make people angry. And maybe I should just be thankful that someone's willing to give her health insurance so she can see a pediatrician. But maybe a deep dive would ask the question about why what kind of insurance or whether I have insurance at all makes a difference between the care the child receives in the medical office. Whether she gets supportive and thoughtful care or whether she's being condescended to. If we're honest with ourselves, we don't have to dig very far. A good majority of our daily choices happen by default. Without question, without further wrestling. I admit I regularly just drop things in my Amazon cart, and magically it arrives at my door within 2 days, without a thought of the larger consequences of using a monopoly for such things, about the toll on the environment to have trucks that come out multiple times a day to multiple houses on my street, to a company that has so many workers' complaints and abuses, but it gets it to me in 2 days, so I just take it. I gotta admit, I drive everywhere because it's faster. Have you ever tried to walk anywhere with 4 kids? Oh my gosh, just putting on shoes is like a 20-minute process. And I don't work out carpools for all my kids' activities because I don't want to put onus on anyone else to drive my kids when I'm able to drive them. And so what happens? 18 individual cars pull up to ballet from Olney, 3 of which from my neighborhood. 18 individual cars pull up to soccer at OBGC fields. I don't countless from my neighborhood. The simmering, quiet mess that we leave keeps peace. It leaves many ditches that we have decided are not worth dying in, and it preserves relationships, but at the cost of upholding small injustices and even large injustices. In Aaron Sorkin's version of To Kill a Mockingbird play that was playing recently at the Kennedy Center, there's a moment where Atticus's housekeeper and close confidant Calpurnia is angry with him. There's sort of like a simmering anger. And he finally brings that quiet mess to a head where he pushes on it and he keeps saying, "You got to tell me what's the matter." And she declares how his treating everyone with such respect when they are actually currently being disrespectful to an entire group of people adds to not only the deep disrespect they're showing, but really the dehumanization of the entire group. She reminds him that sometimes you have to say something. Sometimes you have to do something at the expense of one person's feelings to uphold the feelings or needs of someone else. Do you think I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. So when Jesus says not to assume he comes to bring peace, he is ultimately speaking good news. But like so much of God's good news, it isn't the news we want or is easiest. It is the news we need. Upholding God's goals comes first. The convenient, the non-offensive, the ditch, maybe not worth dying in, the small injustices that we have come to an uneasy peace with are worth saying something and doing something about. The type of division Jesus is speaking of isn't hatred. It's not revenge. It's not ire. It isn't self-righteousness or othering. It's not creating cliques of us versus them. But division sometimes is the consequence of being willing to question, examine, bring the mess into God's light, and to question if there is a better, more God-focused, more just way forward. Sometimes we have to clean out, clean up, speak out, and that is painful. And it leads to defensiveness, disagreements, hard conversations, and honest and prayerful self-reflection. Our epistle today starts with the statements, "By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish." But their faith was not magic. Their faith was a willingness to jump into the mess to act when others acquiesced, to choose this ditch, to claim God's plan may be more, better, or worth the discomfort and division, and by faith they were all right. May we, by faith, find our way to question, to push, to speak out, and to speak up when it comes to the quiet messes that feel safer and easier to just be left alone, and to find the courage and willingness to bring our messes into Christ's light. Amen.